What is up, guys, and welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we are going to be finding out if Jeff Nippard knows how to train his ass. Now, as someone who does train their ass, me, obviously Jeff Nippard does as well, I do think I can talk on this subject because I think I got a bit of cake, but we're going to see if Jeff Nippard has cake and if he knows how to train his ass effectively for muscle growth. So we're going to be going over, he recently posted a video ranking 20 of the best or most popular glute exercises. Now, he did show some pretty terrible ones in the video, so I'm only going to be showing the really, good ones, the B, C, and whatever. I mean, C is not that good, but basically the main ones, not those little shitty banded kickbacks, let's say. But let's get right into the video.
Okay, let's start with the most popular glute exercise on the internet, the hip thrust. The barbell hip thrust is, oddly enough, one of the more studied movements in all of exercise science. As an overall glute max builder, I'm putting the barbell hip thrust into high B tier.
Okay, so Jeff puts the barbell hip thrust in B tier. Personally, for me, I'm gonna have to give this exercise an A. The only reason it's not an S is because it doesn't get as much stretch on the glutes as other exercises, but still think it's a great exercise, very accessible, very easy to do. So A tier for glute growth, for me anyway, is the barbell hip thrust.
I think they belong in high A tier, and I'm actually going to pick them as my #1 option for the middle aspect of the glutes.
All right, and then the machine hip thrust, Jeff is going to give it a high A tier. Personally, for me, I feel like you can get pretty much just about the same results as if you use the barbell and the machine, in my opinion. So both, I would say the machine is slightly better, just because you're more stable, and the belt definitely does feel a lot more comfortable than that freaking bar. But both of them are going to net you good results. And Jeff actually has it the #1 exercise for the middle of the the glute. I could believe that. I mean, it's definitely a great exercise. Definitely not the best overall glute builder, but definitely think it's a great exercise to include. I would have it slightly above the normal barbell hip thrust, so A tier again for me.
The single leg dumbbell hip thrust. These will hit the entire glutes, but unlike the other options, may shift some emphasis to the upper glutes because the glute medius and minimus will need to stabilize for balance. They're going in A tier as well.
Yeah, no, for me, those are going to go in C tier. I don't think you're going to get as much growth from doing a one leg at a time. For me, anyway, I don't really like doing one arm or one limb at a time. I like doing them both at the same time. And also, I feel like, I don't know, not a great exercise for me. It takes much longer. Gonna have to give that one a C. Jeff puts it in the A tier. Yeah, he says, you might engage the upper glutes a little bit more, but you're gonna have to really lighten the load. It's not as easy to stabilize, I feel, and because you're kind of off balance, and for that reason, I'm gonna have to put it in as a C.
Glute bridge is really just a hip thrust, but with less range of motion. But I still prefer the hip thrust because it has more range of motion. Low B tier.
All right, glute bridge, gonna give it a D. You're drastically reducing the range of motion compared. The barbell hip thrust is already a little bit limited on its range of motion, and when you do a glute bridge, you're just reducing it even more. You're gonna be able to lift a lot more weight, a lot more likely to be ego lifting. Not a great exercise. If you don't have a bench or something to to lift yourself up from the rear to do actual hip thrust, then it is an option. But I really don't think you're going to get nearly the same level of development by doing glute bridges rather than hip thrusts. And it's going to bottom out as well. So right in that stretch position, you're not going to have any tension. Nah, not a great exercise in my opinion, D tier.
Squats. I think squats are a super underrated glute builder on social media. Like the hip thrust, you're extending your hips, so you'll activate all regions of the glutes, but especially that middle chunk. You can make the movement more glute dominant by placing the bar a few inches lower on your back, leaning further forward, and focusing on really driving through your hips. Also, research shows that squatting deeper is important for glute growth, so try to at least break parallel. Despite some limitations, I'm still putting the barbell squat in A tier for glute growth.
All right, Jeff gives the barbell back squat an A tier. I'm going to have to give this exercise an S tier for the glutes, especially if you do a low bar squat. I think that's going to hit all regions of the glute really well. You have to stabilize or whatever, so you're going to be hitting the medial. I don't remember what the other head of the glute is called, but you're going to hit that upper glute a lot. This exercise is going to get you some freaking cake. Would definitely recommend barbell back squats to grow your glutes. Highly, very big stretch. Love that exercise. S tier.
With the Smith machine squat, you can place your feet further forward to make it more glute dominant, and you never need to worry about losing your balance. It's also going in A tier.
All right, Smith machine squat, he's giving it an A. I'm also giving it an S. I think it's great. I think it may not activate the upper glutes as much just because you don't have to stabilize as much, but still S tier for me. Great glute exercise. Freaking love that.
The Bulgarian split squat gets a deeper stretch on the glutes than the standard barbell squat, and because they're single leg, in addition to the middle glutes, you'll get the upper glutes more involved. I'm feeling high A tier.
Okay, Jeff, Bulgarian split squats, A for me. Even though I freaking hate this exercise because it's painful as shit and it's single leg at a time, that shit is S tier. In my opinion, that if you can only do one exercise to grow your ass, it is Bulgarian split squats. If I do Bulgarian split squats, the only muscle that is sore is my freaking ass. And I even tried bringing my knee or my leg closer to try and get the quads more involved. No, my freaking ass is always so sore after doing Bulgarian split squats. I don't know what it is. Massive stretch. Even though I hate the exercise, S tier, and it is, in my opinion, the best glute builder you can do. I said it. I freaking hate it, but it's goated.
Kickbacks are great for the upper glutes, especially if you kick up and out diagonally. That's because the upper glute fibers perform both hip extension, which is the up part, and hip abduction, which is the out and diagonally part. Keep thinking low A tier.
All right, so the kickback, it's a fine exercise. Would I put it in A tier though? Maybe I'd go really high B tier. I do think it is good if you do them. I think you're going to get a lot of upper glute growth as well, especially if you go out to the side a little bit more. He said that in the video. I don't know if it made the final cut though. But so, yeah, good exercise. Only downfall for me really is it doesn't get a huge stretch, that big of a stretch, and you got to do single leg at a time. So I'm going to go really high B tier on this one, or maybe really low A tier, somewhere in that range.
Step-ups will target the upper glutes because you're doing one leg at a time, and the stability requirement engages the glute medius and minimus. They get a deep stretch on the entire glute, especially if you set the box a little higher, at or just above knee level, which will force your glutes to work harder than your quads. I think they're killer. Low A tier.
Ooh, step-ups. Personally, I think he freaking missed the mark here. I'm putting step-ups in D tier. I think the step up is just a dog shit exercise. You can't freaking balance yourself unless you're holding on to something like he's doing in the video. Most gyms, they don't have that contraption that he had there, so you're probably just going to wheel a bench and you're not going to be able to balance. Hard to overload, doesn't feel good in my opinion, so freaking D tier for me, bro. But hey, Jeff, you like it? No problem.
Hip abductions are fantastic for the upper glutes. That's because they really challenge the glute medius and minimus directly through their primary function of hip abduction. It's our first exercise going into S tier. And it's also my number one exercise for the upper glutes, making it the reveal behind door number 1.
Yeah, even though I don't do this exercise, I don't have a machine like this at my house, or the Good Life near me does, but I still don't really do it anyway. I do most of my glute development really comes from barbell back squats and RDLs, so that's what I do, and I think I got some good cake, but definitely would give this exercise S tier, God tier for the upper glutes. Specifically, if you just want a big mass glute builder, that's not really the one, because you'd want to target the gluteus maximus more. But for the upper glutes, it's so good. So I totally agree, S tier and best exercise for the upper glutes.
Cable hip abductions do the same basic thing, but I find them harder to overload, they're not quite as stable, and they're a bit more annoying to set up. I'm thinking B tier.
Yeah, I'd probably give the cable hip abduction a B tier as well. Low B tier for me. Hard to stabilize. You got to do one leg at a time. It's not as good when especially if you're at home or whatever. Like maybe like me, I could do that. Personally, I don't. But if I were to train my upper glutes like hard or whatever, then I would definitely do that, because I don't have a hip abduction machine at my house. But really, if the hip abduction machine is right over there, are you really going to go to the cable machine and do that? Probably not. So low B tier for me.
Speaking of stretching the glutes, let's talk about lunges. Lunges will hit the entire glute. You'll get the upper glutes because of glute medius activation due to the stabilization demands. You'll get the mid glutes from the hip extension, and the lower glute area from the deep stretch as you lunge. I'm a huge fan of walking lunges, and I'm sending them straight to S tier.
All right, so Jeff's given walking lunges S tier. I'm moving it down a category. I'm going A tier. In my opinion, I think it's just a worse version of the Bulgarian split squat. I don't like the fact that when you do walking lunges, you're kind of alternating. I feel like you're giving the one side, the sides, time to rest. I would much rather do like a more constant tension approach. And you can't get as much range of motion on a lunge than a Bulgarian split squat. So for me, Bulgarian split squat's better. That's an S tier. Walking lunges, A tier.
Smith machine lunges have all the same benefits, but again, I just don't like doing all my reps on the spot when I have the option to move through space. That's more of a personal preference thing, but I'm still putting these in high A tier. If you elevate your front foot on a small box, you'll get a bit more range of motion at the bottom, which is just enough to sneak these into S tier.
Okay, so regular Smith machine lunges, also going to give it an A tier, but if you do it on the deficit, or you do it where you're not deficit, but where your foot's elevated like that, you can get a lot more range of motion, so I would also have to give that S tier.
Curtsy lunges, you step back diagonally behind your other leg. This requires more balance, meaning it'll activate the glute medius more. So another good option for the upper glutes. I'm feeling low B tier.
Yeah, courtesy lunges ain't it for me. Real hard to balance. Not a big fan. Probably C tier on that one.
The conventional deadlift is a good glute builder since it trains hip extension, it gives a big stretch on the lower glutes, and it's amazing for progressive overload. The issue is it's just such a fatiguing exercise. I have to put it in low B tier. That said, because of the hip abduction and hip external rotation from the wider stance and the foot flare, the sumo deadlift probably does hit the glute medius harder and might shift some emphasis toward the upper glutes. I'm putting it in high B tier as a glute builder.
All right, so for me, both forms of the deadlift are going to go in A tier, I think. Yes, A tier. I think it's a great exercise for the glutes. Jeff puts it into B tier. The only downfall for me is that you don't get a huge range of motion, like you don't get that full stretch. Other than that, I do think they are both good and they will build up the glutes pretty well. But there's another exercise that does it even better. That is why those are only in A tier.
The Romanian deadlift is the better choice for glute hypertrophy, in my opinion, especially for the lower glutes in that glute hamstring tie-in area. And while it does hit the hamstrings hard as well, it smashes the glute max as a basic compound lift that's very conducive to progressive overload. I'm feeling high A tier, and this is actually my #1 exercise for the lower glutes.
Yes, and barbell RDLs, you can do it with a barbell or you can do it with a dumbbell. To me, that is S tier for the freaking ass, man. You are going to get a lot of stretch. Now, specifically, I like to do these in a deficit so you can get even more range of motion on the glutes. If you don't do it in a deficit, I'd still think they're better than both the deadlifts, but I'd probably give it a really high A tier. But if you do them in a deficit and get a really big stretch, definitely nudging that thing into S tier. And I do agree, best exercise for the lower portion of the glute.
I love the 45-degree back extension. A lot of people think of it as just a low back exercise, but since you're extending your hips, your entire glutes will be very active. I'm honestly feeling S tier for these.
Jeff's given back extensions S tier. I would give it an A. For me anyway, I always, if I do this, I feel it in my lower back more than my ass, so can't give it an S tier. I don't think it's going to net you the same gains as those other more compoundy lifts, but I do think it is a good exercise. I'd have it an A tier.
Cable pull-throughs are okay for me. They're great for beginners without much glute strength, but eventually you'll be limited by how much weight you can hold comfortably. They just start to feel awkward once you get some real weight on there. I'm thinking low B tier.
And Jeff's put in the cable pull through B tier. I'm going to go C tier. For me, he said it as well, far too hard to overload, especially for advanced lifters. So if you can't progress on it, how's it a good exercise? So would probably give it a C. If you are a beginner, I do think it could be a viable option. You may move it up to a B or an A, but for more advanced people, definitely C tier. All right, and Jeff's number one pick for the best glute exercise is walking lunges. For me, it would have to be the Bulgarian split squat. I just think you can get a much better stretch, and there are the two worst exercises. Don't do these exercises. They're freaking dog shit. But that is pretty much going to have to wrap up this video. Jeff, massive respect to you, bro. Love your freaking content. I watched that video literally in the first 30 minutes of it coming out because he has some amazing content. Definitely go check him out. His channel link will be in the description. But let me know who you agree with more, Jeff or me. Personally, I agree with myself, but I definitely think Jeff's picks are good exercises. I just think, we all got our own personal takes to it. And, I'm a 16-year-old idiot on YouTube, so obviously I'm wrong, but that's going to have to wrap up this video. So if you guys have enjoyed, make sure to smash that like button, subscribe if you're new here, and I will see you in the next one. Peace.